Sources of biogenetic pool of carbon are: carbon occurs in abiotic environment in four forms. One is the carbon dioxide in atmosphere, then the carbon dioxide dissolved in as bicarbonates in water, then this forms the cyclic pool of carbon. So carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, it is there and dissolved in the water also. Then fossil fuels such as coal, petroleum, natural gas are also the source of carbon dioxide. Carbonates and graphites in rocks also the source of carbon. So these form the reservoir pool of carbon. Then carbon content is how it is recycled. So carbon circulates in nature in gaseous form. That is the carbon dioxide. So cycling of carbon occurs through atmosphere, ocean, and living and dead organisms. So atmospheric air contains 0.032% of CO2, which contains about 1% of total quantity of global carbon. Then roughly 71% carbon occurs in ocean in the form of dissolved carbon dioxide and bicarbonates. Then the oceanic pool of carbon dioxide regulates the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Living and dead organisms and burning of fossil fuel also contribute carbon to atmospheric carbon dioxide pool. So, the contributing processes may be biological or non-biological. So we can see this cycle. Carbon dioxide is used by green plants to prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis. Then this is used by this carbon dioxide is also present in the ocean water. So this is also used by the oceanic organisms. Then fossil fuels are also there which contain carbon in it, and when these fossil fuels are burnt, when these vegetation or living organisms they are decomposed, or fossil fuel is used in the industry and burnt, then all this carbon dioxide is returned back to the environment. So this is how carbon cycle goes on. Now the nitrogen cycle. The atmospheric nitrogen is available to the soil by bacteria fixation, by lightning fixation, when it comes along with the precipitation. Then this nitrogen is used by plants, and plants are eaten by animals, and then these organic matter gets converted into inorganic matter by decomposition. It is available to the soil, so in the form of fertilizers, by mineralization, and by leaching. So it gets converted into ammonia. Then ammonia by nitrification gets converted into nitrates. Then nitrates by nitrification gets converted into nitrates, or eutrophication, by process of eutrophication or by process of leaching it gets percolated into the water bodies. Then plants are plant consuming it in the form of nitrate, and by denitrification bacteria it is converted into gaseous losses, or this nitrogen is converted into fossil fuel, and when fossil fuel is burned this is returned back, or when the plants are using this nitrate, these plants are eaten by living organisms, both are getting decomposed and it is released back into the atmosphere. So this is all about the nitrogen cycle. So in the sulfur cycle, atmospheric sulfur is converted into sulfate. It is absorbed by sulfur organisms. It is absorbed by plants and incorporated into the food. Then plants are eaten by animals. It gets converted into their biomass. Then plants decompose, animals also decompose, and by the process of mineralization, it is returned back into the sulfate form, or by the bacterial reduction, it is returned back into the environment. So here the description of the cycles I have given. So in carbon cycle, what happens? Heterotrophs degrade reduce organic molecule to produce carbon dioxide, whereas autotrophs fix carbon dioxide to produce organics. Then in nitrogen cycle, nitrogen fixing bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. Ammonia can then be oxidized to nitrite and nitrate by nitrification. Then nitrates can then be assimilated by plants. Then soil bacteria convert nitrate back to the nitrogen gas by the process of denitrification. In sulfur cycling, many anoxygenic photosynthesizers and chemoautotrophs use hydrogen sulfide as an electron donor in the process of their respiration, then producing in the process of photosynthesis, producing elemental sulfur and then sulfate. Sulfate reducing bacteria and archaebacteria then use sulfate as a final electron acceptor in anaerobic respiration. Then they convert it back to the hydrogen sulfide. Then next is the phosphorus cycle. So from the by the precipitation, the phosphorus is coming into the environment. Then it is present into the rocks. So by the process of weathering, it goes either through the rain into the underground phosphate reserve, or it goes into the water bodies. Then in the water bodies, formation of phosphate sediments takes place. Then underground phosphate reserve is used by plants by the process of absorption of water and minerals. Plants use it into their body. Plants are eaten by animals. It enters into the body of animals. Then by the process of decomposition, it is again returned back into the environment. So this is the explanation I have given. Phosphate compounds are found in sedimentary rocks, and as the rocks wear down over long time periods, phosphorus they contain slowly leaches into surface water and soil. Volcanic ash, aerosols, and mineral dust can also be significant phosphate sources. So from them also this phosphate can go either into the underground soil or into the water bodies. Though phosphorus has no real gas phase, unlike other animals, so such as carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur. So this is not the real gas, but it is it is leaching into the environment through the rain also. Then phosphate compounds in the soil can be taken up by plants and from there transferred to animals that eat the plants. When plants and animals excrete waste or die, phosphates may be taken up by detrivores or returned to the soil. Phosphorus containing compounds may also be carried in surface runoff to rivers, lakes, and oceans, where they are taken up by aquatic organisms. Now, when phosphorus containing compounds from the bodies or wastes of marine organisms sink to the floor of the ocean, they form new sedimentary layers. Over long periods of time, phosphorus containing sedimentary rock may be moved from the ocean to the land by a geological process called uplift. However, this process is very slow and the average phosphate ion has an oceanic residence time to time in the ocean of 20,000 to 1 lakh years. These phosphate compounds in the soil can be taken up by plants and from there transferred to animals that eat the plants. So when plants and animals excrete waste or die, they may be taken up by detrivores or returned to the soil. Now the definition of PAR, that is photosynthetically active radiation. It is a light of wavelength 400 to 700 nanometer and is the portion of that light spectrum which is utilized by plants for photosynthesis. So the wavelength of light which is used by plants for photosynthesis, that wavelength of light is called as PAR. Then standing crop is defined as biomass of living material in an ecosystem at a particular time. Standing state is defined as the amount of inorganic nutrients present in an ecosystem. Now, ecological succession. It is the process that describes how the structure of a biological community, that is an interacting group of various species in a desert, forest, grassland, marine environment, and so on. So, it is describing the process of how the biological community, uh, that is the interacting group of various species, are coming on in the desert areas, forest, grassland, marine environment, etc., and how they change over time. Means the species which were there on that place in previous time may not be present at the present time. So the structure of this community becomes more complex as new species arrive on the scene. So ecological succession is a series of changes that occur in an ecological community over time. So this will be the definition of ecological succession. So ecological succession is the steady and gradual change in a species of a given area with respect to the changing environment. So what it says that suppose one species started living in a particular habitat, it is going to change the environmental conditions of that habitat. Then these environmental conditions will become so much changed that another species will also be surviving there, and those species will dominate the um, species already present there. So this will change the environment and the species. So it is predictable changes and is an inevitable process which cannot be stopped nature, as all the biotic components have to keep up with the changes in our environment. Then the ultimate aim of this process is to reach equilibrium in the ecosystem. Means the changing processes will going on till the equilibrium level reaches to that place. So the community that achieves this aim is called as climax community. In an attempt to reach this equilibrium, some species increase in number while some other decrease. In an area, the sequence of communities that undergo changes is called seer. Thus, each community that changes is called a seral stage or seral community. Now, we know that community is made of populations and population is made of species. So, there may be grasses also, there may be insects also, there may be algae also, there may be pteridophytes also. So, these species keep on changing till the equilibrium comes, and no other species can change the present species or environmental condition. So this is what the succession is doing. In the process of succession, the species and the environment keeps on changing till the final or the climax environment and the climax community is established on a place. So all the communities that we observe today around us have undergone succession over a period of time since their existence. Thus, we can say that evolution is a process that has taken place simultaneously along with that of ecological succession. So, also the initiation of life on earth can be considered to be a result of this succession process. Then, types of ecological succession. There are following types of ecological succession. The primary succession. Primary succession is the succession that starts in lifeless areas, such as the regions devoid of soil or the areas where the soil is unable to sustain life. We can say that the rocky layer, rocky area where there is no soil, and because there is no soil, so there will be no autotrophs, and so there will be no life. So, primary succession is an ecological succession where a newly formed area is colonized for the first time by a group of species or a community. So, this previously uninhabited barren area is usually lacking topsoil and organic matter. So, the species colonizing an uninhabited area for the first time is referred to as the pioneer species, and the dominating community is called as the pioneer community. So, first time the species of the living organism which will start surviving in that rocky area or the desert area will be the dominant or pioneer community. So here we can see the understand the primary and secondary successions with this diagram. Here this is the rocky area. It started withering, cracks started forming in it. It started forming soil, and then the grasses start growing on it. Then much bigger plants, then much bigger plants, and like this the final stage came, that is the equilibrium stage, that is the tree. So now this area became fully suitable for the dominant groups of the organisms. So a primary succession occurs when a group of species or a community colonize a barren newly formed habitat. An example of primary succession is the establishment of plant or plant animal communities in an area where no soil initially exists, such as bare rocks formed from a lava flow. Other examples are the colonization of a barren area following a severe landslide or a recently exposed land from retreating glaciers. So, after a severe landslide or recently exposed landform from retreating glaciers, that area will become barren. Then, the first organisms or the first living organisms which will start living in that area will be the primary succession. So, another is the occupying of harsh habitats such as sand dunes. The extremely hot temperature of sand dunes makes them available for habitation to only a few highly specialized plants and animals like cactus, etc. So, the first establishment which will be there only by few species into a totally barren area where no life forms are available. So, the first life which appears on that area is called as the primary succession. Then secondary succession occurs when the primary ecosystem gets destroyed. For example, a climax community gets destroyed by fire. Means when the succession started in a place at a totally barren area, and finally the climax community came into existence like the trees. Then after that, suppose for fire occurred into the forest area, and the whole fire burnt out, and there is barren land again on that area. So then, when any living organism will start surviving in that area, that will be called as the secondary succession. So it gets recolonized after destruction. This is known as secondary ecological succession. Some plants emerge first, followed by larger plants. The tall trees block the sunlight and change the structure of organisms below the canopy. Finally, the climax community arrives. So with this, we have completed our chapter ecosystem.